Hello, and welcome to the Federal Railroad Administration's Rail Program Delivery video series. I'm Anthony Thomas, and I'm pleased to introduce Moshe Adams, a grants management specialist with the FRA.
Hello, everyone.
In this video, you'll learn about the process of closing out FRA grants. We will walk you through all of the elements of grant closeout, including important timelines, forms, and procedures. Let's get started.
Standard grant closeout is the process of formally ending a grant agreement between the FRA and the grantee. The grant closeout process is required by the Code of Federal Regulations, 2 CFR 200.343.
The Grants Oversight and New Efficiency, or GON Act, sets forth requirements for closing out all expired grants in order to save taxpayer money. This is one reason why grant closeout is important. Expired grants must be reported. Grant closeout prevents completed grants from expiring.
Through the standard grant closeout process, FRA ensures that all activities in the grant statement of work are completed, the grantee has complied with all administrative requirements, that the key performance measures have been met, and that all expected public benefits have been achieved. When the grantee does not comply with the requirements and the timelines of the standard grant closeout process, they will undergo an administrative closeout. Administrative closeouts may affect other FRA grants that the grantee has received or may influence the grantee's future grant eligibility.
This video will provide grantees with the knowledge to successfully complete the standard grant closeout process and avoid an administrative closeout. Now that we've introduced what grant closeout is, let's go over a checklist of things to think about before starting the grant closeout process.
Once you've confirmed that your project is on schedule to be completed by the end of the period of performance, it is important to review your scope of work and the grant agreement to ensure that all project goals have been met, all project work is complete or will be completed by the end of the period of performance, and all required deliverables have been submitted to the FRA. If the grantee cannot meet the grant requirements before the period of performance ends, they may contact their FRA grant manager for details on how to extend the grant agreement.
It is also important to review the grantee guidance on FRA closeout procedures to familiarize yourself with all of the details of project closeout. Also, ask yourself, is there any remaining funding? Are there any outstanding audit findings? Are there any corrective actions that need to take place? These are all things that can cause delays in the grant closeout process, so they should be addressed before beginning closeout.
Keep in mind that your FRA grant manager and regional manager are there to help. If you need assistance with anything during the grant closeout process, be sure to reach out to them.
Now that we've reviewed the PreCloseout checklist, let's go over the grant closeout process.
Grant closeout occurs at the end of an awards period of performance or whenever the project is completed, whichever is earlier. 90 days before the end of the period of performance, your FRA grant manager will send you an initial closeout reminder email. The grant manager will request that you confirm that your project is on schedule to be completed by the end of the period of performance.
It is important that you reply to your grant manager immediately upon receipt of this email. If the project is on schedule to be completed within 90 days, the grant manager can help begin the closeout process. If you'll need more time to complete the project, let your grant manager know as soon as possible. They may be able to help you extend your grant agreement.
At the close of the period of performance, your grant manager will contact you again, informing you that the period of performance has ended and that FRA must receive all closeout documents from you no later than 90 days after the end of the period of performance.
At this point, the 90-day liquidation period begins on your FRA grant. During this period, all grant balances must be liquidated and all reimbursement requests must be submitted.
The liquidation period ends with the grant closeout date. By this date, all remaining grant funds must be liquidated. In other words, all contractor and subcontractor invoices should be paid and final reimbursement reports submitted to the FRA. This is also the last day to submit all required closeout documentation.
Now, we'll walk you through the required closeout documentation. These include the final property accounting, the final reimbursement request, the final federal financial report, the final progress report, and the final performance report. These requirements must occur and be documented by the closeout date. Note that these requirements are not met until FRA approves all closeout documentation.
Final property accounting. The grantee must account for all real or personal property acquired with federal funds or received from the federal government. Among others, the final property accounting must include the property location, a summary of conditions on the property title, the current market value of real property, the original acquisition cost of the property, and a description of property usage.
Final reimbursement request. The final reimbursement request is used to reimburse the remaining costs incurred up to the end of the period of performance. Grantees will use the Request for Advance or Reimbursement form, SF-270, to submit the request. If the grantee submits a final reimbursement request and doesn't receive a final reimbursement within 80 days of the period of performance end date, the grantee should notify the grant manager as soon as possible.
Final Federal Financial Report. This report provides a summary of the total expenditure under the grant. Grantees should submit the final federal financial report using Form SF-425 after all reimbursements requested in the final reimbursement request have been received and approved. Be sure to leave yourself enough time to complete the final federal financial report by submitting your final reimbursement request as soon as you are able.
Final Progress Report. The Final Progress Report details activities and deliverables from the end of the previous quarter to the period of performance end date. It should include budgetary data, like non-federal contributions, that match the data reported in e-invoicing and on the final federal financial report.
Final Performance Report. The Final Performance Report allows FRA to assess the grantee's project against the requirements outlined in the Notice of Grant Award. It should include the project's objectives, project outputs, project outcomes and public benefits, performance measures, lessons learned, information on maximizing the investment, a budget narrative and final budget, and grantee feedback for the FRA.
Remember, all project costs must be incurred before the period of performance end date. Reimbursements may be filed after the period of performance, as long as their corresponding costs were incurred before the end of the period of performance.
ARA and Tiger grants may require additional performance reporting. For example, Tiger grant recipients must report on how the project is performing based on a set of performance measures 3 to 5 years after project completion. Be sure to note the cancellation date of the funding in order to stay in compliance with your ARA and Tiger grant agreements.
Here are a few helpful tips for you to consider in grant closeout. Be sure to submit all deliverables in a timely manner.
It is very important that grantees comply with the grant closeout procedures and timelines. If the grantee does not comply, FRA may withhold funds awarded through FRA or other federal grants, or perform an administrative closeout which may affect future grant eligibility. Administrative closeout occurs when the grantee does not meet the requirements of standard closeout. This may include late or incomplete reports or deliverables and a lack of response by the grantee. An administrative closeout will also occur when a grantee withdraws from or cancels a grant award.
Be sure to allow enough time to reduce errors when submitting closeout documentation.
Common closeout issues include remaining unliquidated balances, lack of detail in the final performance report, and inaccurate financial data in the final federal financial report and request for advance reimbursement form. Be sure to use exact numbers and ensure that the numbers match across all forms. These errors can slow down the closeout process and delay needed approvals from the FRA. This may affect future grant eligibility.
Now, we'll go through a quick quiz to review some of the information we've learned in this video. Question 1. Your grant's period of performance ends today. When is your grant closeout documentation due? A. In 120 days. B. In 90 days. C. Today. D. 30 days ago.
The correct answer is B, 90 days after the period of performance end date. Remember, your grant must be closed by this date. If your project won't be completed by the end of the period of performance, contact your FRA grant manager to discuss a grant extension.
Question 2. True or false? Grantees can be reimbursed for costs incurred up until the grant closeout date.
False. Grantees can only be reimbursed for costs incurred before the end of the period of performance. Grantees can submit reimbursements after the period of performance, but the original costs must have been incurred before the end of the period of performance.
Question 3. What could happen if a grantee does not comply with grant closeout procedures or timelines? A. FRA withholds funds awarded through other FRA grants. B. Other federal agencies withhold grant funds. C. FRA performs an administrative closeout. Or D. All of the above.
D. Comply with the grant closeout process to remain in good standing regarding their federal grants.
The grantee plays a big role in grant closeout because they are responsible for submitting all of the required closeout documents. However, FRA has an important role as well. FRA is responsible for conducting oversight and for reviewing and approving grant closeout materials. It is FRA's decision as to whether all grant requirements have been completed.
The FRA supports passenger and freight railroading by providing grants and loans to develop safety improvements, relieve congestion, and encourage the expansion and upgrade of passenger and freight rail infrastructure and services. The grant closeout requirements are necessary to allow the FRA to work collaboratively with grantees.
For more information about grant closeout, contact your FRA grant manager and visit the following webpages. Thank you.